I'm Brent Fox. Welcome to I Hate Rock Music. And of course, as I pointed out in my intro, yes, there's lots of things I hate about rock music, but I love rock music. It's in my blood and it's in my DNA. And for my very first video in this ongoing series, I've chosen the Hampton Grease Band because I love the Hampton Grease Band. They're adored by many and reviled by many. And of course, there's a huge chunk of the population that's never heard of them. But they released their first album, Music to Eat, in June 1971. I came across it purely by accident. By 1972, it was already in cutouts. And to see a record on Columbia Records that was in cutouts is very rare indeed. Unlike a lot of the other labels, not much of their Columbia Records catalog ever ended up in cutouts. But the legend has it this is the worst selling record in Columbia Records history. And on top of that, a double album. So a colossal failure for Columbia Records. Although in the long run, of course, now it's considered a masterpiece and is legendary. But I ran across it in cutouts in 1972. I think I paid about $2 for it. And I bought it because the cover looked cool. And there was only a handful of songs on it. So I knew it was going to have long jams, which, of course, by that tender age, I was already interested in. And I did a little research and found out that they originally gave the album to Columbia, and it had three 20-minute songs on it. And Columbia said, well, you need to have a couple shorter songs on there because, you know, we're kind of looking for some hits. But they were barking up the wrong tree because the band ended up recording a couple of ridiculous short songs to fill out the album. One of them is called Maria, about watching Maria tantalizingly washing up down by the riverbed. It's got to be heard to be believed. And so an interesting combination, a lot of kind of Grateful Dead sort of extended guitar jams with a lot of interplay marked by, and improvisations marked by the unique vocals of Bruce Hampton. I think the only thing I can compare him to is sometimes people say they're Beefheartish, but frankly, I think they remind me far more of Wildman Fisher. But anyway, Glenn Phillips, the main guitar player, went on to some limited exposure and fame afterwards, signing to Virgin Records in the UK and releasing some very unique instrumental solo records with his really interesting approach to playing guitar. And of course, the leader and singer, Bruce Hampton, disappeared for a while and then showed up with a solo album called The Late Bronze Age and put together a band and toured under that name for a while before forming the Aquarium Rescue Unit, another equally wacky band that has some records out, and there's some great live shows on YouTube. But I think one reason why they ended up signing with Columbia because Duane Allman was a big fan. Hampton Grease Band was from Atlanta, Georgia, and so Duane Allman championed them. So I think he probably had a lot to do with them getting signed to Columbia. Interesting, he didn't have them signed to Capricorn Records. I'm sure the heads of Capricorn Records weren't that interested. But Duane Allman also got him some great gigs, including the Atlanta Pop Festival. And interestingly enough, and appropriate, they were signed to Frank Zappa's label. Frank Zappa was well aware of the band. In some liner notes, he referred to them as the Boys from Atlanta. But in 1973, they were signed to Bizarre Straight Records, and unfortunately quickly broke up. So sadly, no material was ever issued on Zappa's label, which would have been a great home for them. And I often wonder if there's material out there in the vaults from 72 to 73. I would imagine so, since the first record was recorded in late 1970 and released in 1971. So that's 3 years. So there probably is some material out there, and it'd be nice if it showed up. I was also surprised to find out actually fairly recently that the infamous concert with Frank Zappa and John Lennon in June 71 at the Fillmore, which was kind of a disaster in ways due to the participation of Yoko Ono for one thing. And there's some great anecdotes about the horror that Frank Zappa had and actually his ambivalence to playing with a former Beatle. But anyway, that was carefully arranged. But yeah, the Hampton Grease Band opened for that show, and oddly, a Detroit power trio called Head Over Heels that has one album on Capitol was also the opener, which makes no sense at all. Head Over Heels are a pretty cool band. I'll probably end up doing a video about them. But anyway, there's not much else to say about them. You kind of have to hear them. It's kind of like a more jazzy, whacked uh, version of the Grateful Dead as far as instrumentation. Definitely a lot more oblique than anything you'd hear coming out of San Francisco, and then punctuated by Bruce Hampton and his bizarre lyrics and his howling vocal style. But I quite enjoy them. There's there of course is their album Music to Eat, and you can see why I saw that cover in the racks for $2 and bought that. So well worth purchasing if you are more adventurous and like Zappa and Beefheart and stuff like that. You'll be very pleased. And I was happy to find in the internet over the years a collection of 1968 demos. A lot of the material ended up on the Music to Eat album, albeit in a more primitive form. And there was actually a horn player on the demos, which was kind of interesting to hear. But I'm not sure exactly what year the band got together. I would suspect it's probably around 1968. It's hard to imagine music like this in 1967. And I was also fortunate enough to get this collection of Hampton Grease Band live at the Atlanta Pop Festival. And it bears out everything that we've ever heard about their live shows being pretty chaotic with a lot of wild antics that got the crowds riled up. And then on this particular show, they end up with a rousing, bizarre version of "Rock Around the Clock" with Bruce Hampton howling away. So a pure joy. So that's all. Unfortunately, that's all I have to say about Hampton Grease Band. There's not really that much information out there, and the only thing I can add to that is I fucking love Hampton Grease Band. And anybody that wants to get into them, go out there and get it. It's available on CD. The records out there varying in price from $30 to $70 depending, and good times. So there you have it. I'm Brian Fox, and I hate rock music.